Last Christmas by Jethro Jessup. Illustrated by Dan Wilson of decreate.co.uk. The snow-covered rooftops sparkled in the moonlight as they flashed past far below. The night air was crisp and cold so high up, and Santa released his grip on the reins to pull his hood further forward over his ears. The reindeer knew the route as well as him, perhaps better. Normally he wouldn't have worried about giving them control of the sleigh for a little while, but tonight something had them spooked. They were skittish and uneasy and wouldn't pull straight, requiring constant attention from their master, who sat hunched in the driving seat, only his white beard visible beneath the heavy brim of his hood. He could feel it too. The night air that was normally filled with the joyful dreams of the world on Christmas Eve was tonight filled with something darker, a shapeless sense of foreboding that pierced his heart and chilled him deeper than the winter wind. He looked down, squinting to make out the details of the town over which he flew, but all was dark below. The bright moon picked out the pattern of houses and roads, but there were no lights anywhere. He was used to the bright twinkle of Christmas lights shining up at him as he passed, and their absence planted seeds of worry in his mind. On a normal Christmas Eve he would have been working by now, riding the waves of goodwill down to each sleeping person to deliver presents, to spread joy and hope. It had always been this way. Through wars and famines, revolutions and disasters of every kind, Santa had always felt those waves calling him down. But tonight he felt nothing. Nothing except a sense of dread that grew and grew until at last he could bear it no longer, and with a flick of the reins, for the first time in memory, he turned the sleigh towards the ground. Santa swung down cautiously from the running board. His boots broke the crust of snow and sank several inches before finding solid ground. He glanced uneasily around the empty car park in which he had landed, feeling exposed and vulnerable. In over 300 years, Santa's job had changed a great deal, but in all that time, one rule had remained unbroken. Never land on the ground. Rooftops, yes, treetops occasionally, but on the ground, never. And yet here he was now, his footprints marking the fresh snow outside a dark and silent shopping centre. What was he doing? He should be doing his job as he had always done. But something was very wrong, and he had to find out what. Hyo! His soft call seemed loud in the open space, but not even an echo came in reply. He switched to English. Hello? Is anybody here? There was nothing. No dogs barked, no traffic rumbled in the distance. He began walking towards the nearest building, stopping every few paces to call out, until suddenly he froze, straining his ears for the sound he thought he had heard. He was about to move, thinking he had imagined it, when it came again, closer now. A sighing moan. A melancholy sound filled with loneliness and with hunger. Santa turned, trying to pinpoint the sound, and then he saw them. A dozen figures shambling towards him from the far side of the car park. Relief washed over him at the sight of people, and he took several steps forward before realizing something was wrong. He could not sense them as he usually could with humans, and the reindeer, harnessed to the sleigh between him and the approaching group, were whinnying and stamping agitatedly. He could feel the fear building in his animals, and was about to speak some words of comfort, when the gaunt man leading the group lunged forward with surprising speed and threw his arms around Blitzen's neck. The reindeer reared, trying to dislodge its attacker, but the man held on, and with a savage jerk of his head, sunk his teeth into Blitzen's throat. Reindeer are strong creatures, and their skin is tough, but instantly the man's mouth was foaming with blood. Santa felt the reindeer's pain as his own and cried out, stumbling forwards to try and help, but it was too late. Others from the group were now in amongst the reindeer, and Santa saw Comet and Prancer also bitten. The iron smell of blood filled the air, and suddenly the group of beasts wheeled sharply as one, overturning the sleigh and spilling Santa's black sack out onto the snow. Then they were galloping. Santa saw several of their attackers trampled underfoot before the team was airborne. A few figures clung on at first, but one by one they fell to the ground as Santa watched his sleigh disappear into the night sky. Still reeling from the shock of the attack, he snatched up his sack and took a few stumbling steps before the realization that he was stranded hit him like a wave. As he sunk to the ground, he registered the rattle of a door being opened before the darkness took him and he knew no more. He came to gradually, lying on his back on a hard floor. Nearby voices shouted in English, and he listened for a while, trying to discern the nature of their argument. But they spoke too fast, and he couldn't keep up, so finally he shook the last of the fog from his brain and stood. There were 4 people in the room, and they fell silent as soon as they saw him rise, their eyes showing a mix of fear and curiosity. "Who of you carried me inside? I thank you." He looked from one to the other, but no one replied. They looked tired, with black bags under their eyes, and he could smell the fear coming off them. He continued, wanting to break the silence. "I think, perhaps, you saved my life." At this, a middle-aged woman at the edge of the group gave a grim smile, and was about to speak when the man beside her interrupted angrily. "You're damn right we did, old man, and risked our own in the process. What the hell were you doing out there?" "Looking for people," Santa replied. "I didn't realize there was any danger." The man snorted and pointed at the heavy black sack at Santa's feet. "What's in there? We tried to open it, but—" "Only I can open it," Santa replied. The man looked as though he was about to argue, but a second woman stepped in and laid a hand on his arm. "It doesn't matter, Stephen. Unless he has a truckload of food and water, we're still finished." "Where are you from?" She turned her attention to Santa. "That's some accent you have there." "Lapland," he replied, the thought of his home bringing a smile that quickly became a frown as Stephen barked a disgusted laugh. "Lapland! The guy's insane. Just what we need, a crazy mall Santa." Stephen turned away, and Santa spoke to the woman, who was now regarding him mistrustfully. "Those people out there, you are in here to escape them." "Not people," she replied. "Zombies. And yes, we're in here to escape them. You go outside, you're dead." She stepped closer, curiosity overcoming her mistrust. "You don't know about them?" "No. The first I know is when they attack me and—" He stopped, the fearful screams of his beloved reindeer still reverberating in his ears. "Well, wherever you came from, it doesn't matter. You're here now, and you'll die here with the rest of us." She gave a shrug and turned away. Her shoulders slumped, her head hung low. Santa couldn't bear it. He thrived on joy and love and hope, and the defeat that he felt in these people sapped his strength even as he stood watching them. And at that moment he made a decision. He had already broken his first rule by landing on the ground. Now his sleigh was gone, his reindeer lost, himself stranded. Why not go one step further? He took a deep breath. "My reindeer and I were attacked. They were scared and took flight without me, but they are alive. At least a few are. I can feel that much, though they are many miles away." He pointed west, to where he could indeed feel the faintest glow of the connection he shared with his beasts. "I will go to them. If you would come also, there is room on the sleigh for us all to escape." He looked around them. but they simply stared back at him in shocked silence. The first to answer was the second man who had been silent until now. "Reindeer, your sleigh." He looked at Santa, taking in the rich red suit, the black leather boots, the thick white beard, as if for the first time. "Are you insane? Do you realize what will happen if we go out there?" "I realize what will happen if we stay in here," Santa replied, his voice gaining strength with every word. "I realize what has already happened to you. You have all given up hope." He looked around them, and none could meet his eyes. "Well, I will not give up. I am hope. I am joy." He paused and picked up the great black sack from his feet. "I am Santa Claus." No one spoke, but he sensed a change in the room and continued, nurturing the spark of emotion that he thought he could still feel flickering within the people stood before him. "I know all of you," he said, and turned to the nearest man. "Peter Foray, when you were 6, I gave you a bicycle with red wheels, just like you wanted. Do you remember?" Peter looked shocked, but before he could reply, Santa turned to the others one by one. "Francine Ross, I gave you a guitar when you were 10. Stephen M., that book of horror stories that you read every night, even though it gave you nightmares. Jesse Berman, you wanted dolls, so I gave you 3 with long silk dresses when you were 7 years old." They stared at him in disbelief, but he felt it for sure now. The spark had kindled within them all, and he reached into the sack as he continued. "I always had a present for everyone. How did I do that?" No one answered, but they all watched, sensing that something was about to happen. "I will tell you how," he whispered. "This sack, this is the secret. It will deliver to my hand whatever present is needed to give the receiver joy and hope." He paused, then drew his hand from the mouth of the sack, and Stephen gasped as Santa handed him a short-barreled shotgun, 2 boxes of cartridges tied to it with bright blue ribbon. Before anyone could speak, Santa dipped in again, and this time brought out a long katana, its shining blade etched with a pattern of snowflakes, which he handed to Jesse. To Francine he gave a compact black assault rifle, and to Peter a pair of silver Berettas with red sandalwood grips. As he handed out the presents, he felt the spark burst to a flame, and it warmed him more than any physical fire. He took out bottles of water and bars of dense dry fruit, and saw that Jessie had tears on her cheeks as she tasted the food. When they had eaten and drunk their fill, Santa stood. He had never given himself a present before, but now he reached into the sack and smiled when he drew out a black pump-action shotgun. He walked to the door, swinging the sack on his back as he went, and pushed it open. A blast of freezing wind scattered snow across the 4 figures assembled behind him, but they held their ground and did not flinch. Santa smiled at each of them. "Happy Christmas to all." He racked a shell into the shotgun and turned to face the darkness outside. "And to all, a good night." Last Christmas was read and recorded by Jethro Jessup. The illustrations were by Dan Wilson of decreate.co.uk. This recording was made for the Old Words Home YouTube channel. Sound effects are from freesound.org.